The wedding hall was bathed in golden light, the chandeliers casting a warm glow over the sea of elegantly dressed guests. The scent of roses, lilies, and fresh-cut peonies filled the air, mixing with the soft melody of a string quartet playing in the background. It was perfect. Everything had been planned down to the finest detail: the delicate lace of her gown, the shimmering veil draped over her shoulders, the way the candles flickered along the grand aisle. It was the moment every girl dreamed of. Yet, deep inside, something felt off. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, drowning out the music as she took slow, deliberate steps toward the altar. Her father walked beside her, his grip firm yet gentle. The entire hall was watching, holding their breath as she moved forward. She could see their smiling faces, the soft murmurs of admiration, the way her mother wiped at her teary eyes. But her gaze was locked on one person, him. Her groom stood tall at the altar, dressed in an elegant black suit that fit him perfectly. His dark eyes held hers, but something in them made her pause. His face was unreadable, his expression calm but distant. Was he nervous? Or was it something else? Doubt flickered in the back of her mind, but she pushed it away. This was love. This was the man she had chosen. She forced a smile and took another step forward. The world seemed to blur around her, the guests, the flowers, even the music fading into the background. All that remained was the long aisles stretching endlessly ahead, the soft rustle of her dress as she moved, and the hammering of her heart. Something felt wrong. Then, just as she reached the altar, just as she raised her hand to take his, a blinding light engulfed her. Gasps erupted from the guests. Someone screamed. The quartet's music stopped abruptly, replaced by cries of confusion. The air seemed to crackle with electricity, the golden glow of the chandeliers suddenly overtaken by the dazzling white light that swallowed her whole. She felt her body being pulled, weightless, as if she was drifting away from reality itself. Then nothing. She gasped, her lungs struggling for air as the cold wind slammed against her. The warmth of the wedding hall was gone. The scent of roses and candles had vanished. The distant hum of murmuring guests, the golden glow, the elegant decorations, all of it had disappeared. Instead, she stood in the middle of a quiet, empty street. Her wedding gown was gone. In its place, she wore casual clothes, a soft, oversized sweater and faded jeans that looked all too familiar. Her fingers trembled as she reached up, touching her face, her hair, her body. She was real. This was real.
But how?
She spun in place, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The street looked exactly as she remembered it. A narrow road lined with maple trees, their golden leaves fluttering in the breeze. The faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a vendor's cart nearby. The small bookstore across the street with a 20% off sign taped to the window. She had been here before. But that was impossible. Her legs felt weak, her mind racing as she tried to understand what had happened. Just moments ago, she had been at the altar. Moments ago, she was about to get married. So why was she here? A shiver ran down her spine as a whisper brushed against her ear, soft and chilling. If you make the same mistake again, you will disappear forever. She whipped around, but there was no one there. Her heart slammed against her ribs, fear gripping her so tightly she could barely breathe. She wasn't dreaming. She wasn't imagining this. Something had happened. Something impossible. And she had no idea how to stop it. The air was crisp with autumn's bite, and the familiar scent of roasted chestnuts lingered in the distance. She stood frozen, her mind reeling. This was the past. She knew this street. She had walked it countless times. The bookstore on the corner, the cafe where she used to sit for hours with a warm drink in hand. This was a place she hadn't seen in years. Not since. A chill ran down her spine. Not since she met him for the first time. Her breath caught in her throat as realization settled in. This was before everything. Before the engagement, before the wedding, before the heartbreak she had ignored. Her hands clenched into fists as the whisper echoed in her mind again. If you make the same mistake again, you will disappear forever. What mistake? Hadn't she chosen love? Hadn't she given her heart fully? What had she done so wrong that time itself had thrown her back here, forcing her to relive it? A gust of wind blew past, carrying the sound of laughter. Then she saw him, standing just a few feet away, wearing the same leather jacket and confident smirk she remembered so well. He looked the same, young, charming, untouchable. The man she had once thought was her destiny. Her chest tightened. This was the moment they met for the first time. She had been carrying a cup of coffee that day, her hands wrapped around the warmth. The streets had been just as lively, students passing by, the distant honking of cars filling the air. She had been distracted, flipping through a book she had just bought. And then, she had bumped into him. She had spilled coffee all over his shirt, gasped in horror, and fumbled to apologize. He had laughed, brushing it off like it was nothing. She had been flustered, embarrassed, and then utterly enchanted when he had grinned at her, his teasing words effortlessly drawing her in. It was the beginning of everything. She inhaled sharply. She could already see the moment playing out. Her past self was just a few steps away, walking toward him, coffee cup in hand, completely unaware. If she let things happen exactly as before, their love story would start again. Would she make the same choices? Would she fall for him again? Or would she finally see the truth hiding behind that smile? The past was repeating itself. And this time, she had a choice. Her heart pounded as she watched her past self walk toward him, coffee cup in hand, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. This was the moment she had met him. The moment her past self had fallen into the web of what she had once thought was love. But now she knew better. This wasn't just a second chance, it was a test. If you make the same mistake again, you will disappear forever. She didn't know who had sent her back or why, but the warning was clear. Something about her relationship with him had been a mistake. And if she didn't figure it out, she would lose everything. Her body tensed as she saw her past self closing in on him. A few more steps, and history would repeat itself. No, not this time. Acting purely on instinct, she stepped forward, bumping into her past self just as she was about to collide with him. The coffee cup slipped from her hands, spilling onto the ground instead of his shirt. Her past self gasped in shock, stumbling backward, her face turning red. Oh my God, But the moment was already broken. The coffee had missed him entirely. There was no laughter, no teasing remark, no charming exchange that had once changed everything. For the first time, she had changed the past. The man turned toward them, confusion flashing in his dark eyes. He looked between her and her past self, as if sensing something was off. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice familiar yet strange now that she knew how much pain he had caused her in the future. Her past self nodded quickly, still flustered. "Why, yeah, sorry about that. I wasn't looking." He chuckled, but there was no spark between them now. No fateful meeting. No love at first sight. She had broken the chain. Relief flooded through her. She took a step back, watching as her past self gathered her things and hurried away. She didn't follow him this time. She didn't stop to talk. And just like that, the moment that had once changed her life never happened. But the question remained, had she just saved herself? Or had she set something even worse into motion? The wind picked up, whispering in her ear again. One mistake is gone. But what will you do next? A shiver ran down her spine. This wasn't over. Not even close. The moment had passed. The past had changed. She stood frozen in place, watching as her past self disappeared down the street, never looking back. The man she had once thought was her fate stood there for a moment, puzzled, then shook his head and walked away. And just like that, the first thread of their love story had unraveled. Her heart pounded. I changed it. But what now? The world around her felt the same, yet something inside her shifted, like an invisible thread had been pulled, altering the course of everything that was supposed to happen next. The question was, had she done the right thing? A gust of wind sent a chill down her spine. The voice whispered again. One mistake is gone. But what will you do next? She clenched her fists. If changing the past was an option, then maybe she could fix everything. Maybe she could rewrite her entire love story, erase the pain, the betrayal, the regret. Maybe this was her chance. But where did she even begin? She needed answers. The first place that came to mind was the library. It was the only quiet space where she could think without distractions. As she walked down the familiar streets, the weight of her situation settled in. This wasn't just a dream or an illusion. She had truly gone back in time. But how far? She needed a reference point, something to anchor her. As she passed by a newspaper stand, her gaze landed on the date printed across the front page. Her breath hitched. She was 3 years in the past. 3 years before the wedding. Before the heartbreak. Before she had given everything to a love that wasn't meant to last. She pressed a hand against her chest, steadying herself. I can't let things happen the same way. Not this time. She needed to remember every moment that had led to her downfall. Every warning sign she had ignored. Every choice that had brought her to the altar, only for fate to pull her away. And there was only one person who could help her with that. Her best friend. She hesitated in front of the cafe, watching through the window as a familiar figure sat inside, sipping a latte. Her best friend, Mia, was right where she remembered. Back then, Mia had warned her about him, had told her to slow down, to be careful. But she hadn't listened. She had been so caught up in the rush of love that she had brushed off every warning sign. But now she had a second chance. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. Mia looked up at her, her lips curving into a smile. Hey, you're early today. What's up? For a moment, she could only stare. Mia was alive. Alive. Her throat tightened. She had almost forgotten. 2 years from now, Mia would be gone, taken away in an accident that had shattered her world. This wasn't just about fixing her love story. This was about saving everyone she had lost. She swallowed hard and slid into the seat across from Mia, her hands trembling. I need your help, she whispered. Mia raised an eyebrow. With what? She exhaled slowly. With stopping me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Mia stirred her latte, watching her with a puzzled expression. The biggest mistake of your life? That's a little dramatic, don't you think? If only she knew. She opened her mouth, but the words got caught in her throat. How was she supposed to explain this? That she had been thrown back in time and was reliving the past? That if she made the same mistake again, she would disappear forever? Mia would think she had lost her mind. Instead, she exhaled and chose her words carefully. I feel like I need to rethink my choices. My relationship, my future. Everything. Mia leaned back, tilting her head. Wait. Are you talking about him? Her stomach clenched. Even in the past, Mia had been skeptical of him. She had voiced her concerns, had tried to warn her, but she had ignored it all, too blinded by love to listen. Now, she had to listen. She nodded slowly. Yeah. Mia sighed. Look, I know you like him, but you barely know him. You fall fast and you trust too easily. Her fingers curled against the table. That was true. She had believed in the fairy tale, had let herself be swept away by romance, only to wake up too late. But what exactly had gone wrong? She searched her memories. There had been no obvious betrayal, no scandal. Nothing dramatic. Just a slow, quiet loss of something she hadn't even realized was missing. Then the wedding. The disappearance. A puzzle piece was still missing. What if, she said slowly, I told you that I already knew how this relationship would end? Mia frowned. What do you mean? She hesitated. This was the moment of truth. Would she risk telling Mia the whole story? Or would she keep her secret and try to fix things on her own? She bit her lip. Just humor me for a second. If I told you I knew the future, and I told you this relationship would end badly, would you believe me? Mia studied her, tapping her fingers against the table. You're acting weird. But if I'm being honest, I'd believe it. I never had a good feeling about him. Her heart clenched. Mia had always been on her side. Back then, she had dismissed her best friend's concerns. But now she would listen. Taking a deep breath, she made a decision. I don't want to make the same mistake again, she said firmly. Help me change things. Mia smirked. Finally. Took you long enough. A small laugh escaped her lips. For the first time since waking up in the past, she felt hope. This time, she wouldn't be alone. This time, she would rewrite her story. And this time, she would uncover the truth before it was too late. Mia sipped her latte, watching her closely. So, what's the plan? She let out a slow breath, her mind racing. I don't know yet, but I need to figure out where things went wrong. Mia leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. You're serious about this, huh? She met her friend's gaze. Dead serious. Mia sighed, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. All right, let's break it down. You say this relationship ends badly, but how exactly? Did he cheat?
Lie?
Turn into some secret villain. That was the problem. There had been no dramatic betrayal. No exposed secrets. No lies she could recall. It had just fallen apart. The love had faded, and she had never understood why. She shook her head. No, it wasn't like that. It was slow. Like one day, everything was fine, and the next it wasn't. I thought we were happy, but her throat tightened. On their wedding day, she had walked down the aisle, smiling, ready to start forever. And then, she had disappeared.
Why?
Mia frowned. Maybe it wasn't about him. She blinked. What? Mia tapped her fingers against the table. You keep thinking he's the problem. But what if the mistake wasn't choosing him? A cold realization crept up her spine. She had been focusing on him this whole time. Avoiding their first meeting, rewriting their love story. But what if the mistake was something she did? What if this second chance wasn't about stopping the relationship, but fixing herself? Mia tilted her head. What do you really regret? Her breath caught. She had been so wrapped up in love, in planning a future with him, that she had let other parts of her life slip away. Her friendships, her dreams, the things that once made her happy. She had given them up without realizing it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real mistake. She gripped the edge of the table, her heart pounding. If she had lost herself before, then this time, she would find herself. And maybe, just maybe, that would change everything. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had been so focused on him, on their love story, that she had ignored the slow erosion of herself. The things she once loved, the dreams she once had, they had all faded into the background the moment she prioritized the relationship above everything else. And that was the real mistake. Not choosing him, but losing herself in the process. Mia watched her, eyes sharp with understanding. So, what are you going to do about it? She exhaled, a new sense of determination settling in her chest. I'm going to live for myself this time. No more making decisions just to fit into someone else's world. No more putting love before my own happiness. Mia grinned. Now that's the kind of energy I like. But just as she felt a flicker of hope, something shifted. A sudden dizziness overtook her, making the cafe blur around her. The warmth of the coffee shop turned icy, and a whisper echoed in her ears. You're changing too much. Her body stiffened. The world pulsed, like reality itself was resisting her choices. Then, just as quickly as it came, the sensation was gone. Mia's voice broke through the haze. Hey, you okay? You spaced out for a second. She swallowed, forcing a smile.
Yeah.
Just thinking. But inside, panic coiled around her heart. Someone was watching. And it didn't want her rewriting fate. She left the cafe with a plan. Step 1. Rekindle the passions she had abandoned in her past life. Step 2. Strengthen the friendships she had let slip away. Step 3. Avoid the old path that led her to heartbreak. It all started with her dream, photography. Before she had met him, she had wanted to be a travel photographer, capturing the world through her lens. But as their relationship had progressed, she had made compromises. She had taken a corporate job to have a stable future together. She had turned down opportunities to travel because he hadn't wanted a long-distance relationship. And little by little, she had let go of the things that made her her. No more. She pulled out her phone and searched for photography workshops in the city. She didn't care how much time or effort it took. She was getting that part of herself back. The moment she hit register for a class, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Well, this is a surprise." Her breath caught. She turned slowly, her heart thudding against her ribs. It was him, the man she had once loved, the man she had been trying to avoid, the man who was supposed to be a stranger to her now. And yet, he was looking at her like he knew her, like fate was trying to pull them back together. A chill ran down her spine. Had she really changed anything at all? Her breath hitched as she stared at him. He stood just a few feet away, his sharp eyes scanning her as if he were trying to remember something. Like a memory was tugging at the edges of his mind but couldn't quite take form. That wasn't right. In the past, this was supposed to be the first time they met. A random encounter, a casual introduction through mutual friends. But now, he was here, looking at her as if he already knew her. Something was wrong. She swallowed hard, forcing a polite smile. "Oh, hi." His lips curled up slightly. "You don't remember me, do you?" Her pulse jumped. What was happening? This wasn't how things had gone before. She was supposed to be the one who knew him while he remained completely unaware of their past. Yet now the roles seemed reversed. She had changed something, but she didn't know what. She played it safe. Should I?" He chuckled, sliding his hands into his pockets. "Maybe not. But I remember you." Her stomach flipped. That wasn't possible. She had been the one to go back in time. There was no way he could remember her unless. A terrifying thought struck her. Was he also reliving the past? She clenched her hands, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met before." His gaze lingered on her for a second longer than necessary before he nodded.
"Right.
"My mistake." But she didn't believe him. He knew something, and she needed to find out what. She parted ways with him as quickly as she could, heart racing the whole way home. The moment she stepped inside her apartment, she locked the door and pressed her back against it, breathing heavily. This changed everything. If he was also aware of the past, then her second chance wasn't hers alone. What did that mean? Had he also been given a chance to rewrite their story? Or worse, had he been sent back for an entirely different reason? A shiver ran down her spine. This wasn't just about avoiding a mistake anymore. This was a game of who remembered what, and whether or not fate would let her escape. Because if he was also changing things, then she had no idea how this story was going to end. The air in her apartment felt heavier than usual, as if the very walls were pressing in on her. She knew she had changed something, but so had he. If he remembered her, then everything she had planned was at risk. Her mind reeled with possibilities. Did he remember their love story? Did he know how it ended? Or worse, was he also trying to change the past just like she was? A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Her heart pounded as she cautiously approached. She wasn't expecting anyone. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the door and pulled it open just enough to see him, the very person she had been running from, standing at her doorstep, hands in his pockets, eyes filled with something unreadable. "Hey," he said casually, as if this were normal. "We need to talk." Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door shut. But she didn't. Instead, she forced a calm expression. "About what?" His lips twitched into a smirk. "You already know." Cold fear slithered down her spine. So it was true. He wasn't just aware, he was fully aware. She took a slow breath, stepping back to let him in. If she wanted to figure out what he knew, she had to play along. They sat across from each other in her small living room, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. He studied her, his sharp gaze searching her face, as if trying to confirm something. "You're different," he finally said. Her fingers curled into fists on her lap. "So are you." A smirk flickered across his lips. "Guess that makes us even." She frowned. "How much do you remember?" His smirk faded. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Everything." Her breath hitched. Everything? Every moment of their love story, every mistake, every heartbreak. He remembered it all? She swallowed hard. Then why are you here? His gaze darkened. Because I'm not letting you run away. Her chest tightened. So, that was it. He wasn't just aware of the past. He was fighting to keep it from changing. And if he wanted their love story to play out the same way, then he was her greatest enemy in rewriting fate. She felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He knew. Not just bits and pieces. Not just vague memories. He remembered everything. And worse, he didn't want their story to change. Her fingers dug into the fabric of the couch as she forced herself to meet his gaze. You're trying to stop me. He tilted his head slightly, amusement flickering in his eyes. I wouldn't say stop. He leaned back, arms draped over the couch like he had all the time in the world. I just don't think you understand what you're doing. Her heart pounded. I know exactly what I'm doing. He arched an eyebrow. Do you? The confidence in his voice sent unease crawling down her spine. She had assumed she was the only one rewriting their fate. But if he remembered everything, that meant he had already seen her trying to change things. Had he been watching her this whole time? Had every decision she made, the ones she thought would break their cycle, been useless? She clenched her fists. Why do you want things to stay the same? We were miserable by the end, and you know it. His smirk faded. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then, he exhaled slowly, looking almost tired. Do you really think we were miserable? She blinked, thrown off by the shift in his tone. I loved you, he said, voice quieter now. Even when things started to fall apart. Even when I didn't understand what was going wrong. And now here you are, acting like none of it mattered. Her chest tightened. It had mattered. It had hurt. That was why she was doing this. But he didn't see it that way. He saw this as her erasing what they had. And that was the problem. She had come into this thinking she just had to avoid him. That if she took a different path, she could escape the fate that had led to her disappearing at the altar. But she had underestimated him. She wasn't just rewriting her own story. She was rewriting his, too. And he wasn't going to let that happen. Her entire plan had been to stay away from him, to fix her own mistakes and break free from the past. But now, she was facing a new reality. This wasn't just her second chance. It was his, too. And if he was fighting to keep their love story the same, then this wasn't just a choice anymore. It was a battle. One of them would win. One of them would lose. And if she made the wrong move, she would disappear forever. She stood in front of him, the weight of their past pressing down on her like a storm about to break. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. You think love is enough to keep us together, she said quietly, her voice steady. But love isn't supposed to make you lose yourself. His jaw clenched, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Fear that she would walk away. Fear that he had already lost her. I don't want to lose you again, he admitted. She inhaled sharply. She had waited years to hear those words, to know that he regretted the way things had ended. But it didn't change the truth. She had lost herself in their love story. And if she didn't make a different choice now, she would disappear forever. Her fingers curled into fists. You're not supposed to hold on to me if it means I have to break myself to stay. His eyes darkened, his expression unreadable. And what if you're wrong? She stilled. What? What if changing things only makes it worse? His voice was low, filled with something she couldn't quite name. What if fate was always going to bring us back together, no matter how hard you try to run? A shiver ran down her spine, because for the first time, she didn't have an answer. She closed her eyes, breathing in deeply. This wasn't just about them. It was about her, her choices, her life. She had thought rewriting the past meant erasing him. But maybe she had been going about this the wrong way. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. I'm not running, she said, voice firm. I'm choosing myself. Something flickered in his expression. And then, a sudden pull. A rush of light. She gasped as the world around her began to crack, like shattered glass floating in midair. Time was reacting to her decision. The past was either breaking or resetting. His voice cut through the chaos. Will I see you again? She hesitated. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile. If fate wants us to meet, we will. And then, everything disappeared. She woke up to sunlight streaming through her window. Her heart pounded as she sat up, breathless.
She was back.
Back in the present. Back in a life that was hers. No wedding dress. No altar. Just her, exactly where she was meant to be. Her phone buzzed. A text. From an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. Unknown. If fate wants us to meet, we will. Her breath caught. Because even after everything, even after all the choices she made, fate was still watching. And maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet.